Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Confluential Live. I'm Kyler Cheatham, joined by Adam Cheatham every week. Happy Friday, depending on where you're joining us from in the world today. We're really happy you're here. We are talking about how systems can often be implemented through misunderstanding a lot of processes, right? And how a lot of the functions that work over here might not work over here, and why that is. So it's kind of the real life story of an implementation, if you will, not essentially a lot of times what it's packaged as in the sales process. So we're excited to be able to kind of dig into that with you today. I know a lot of what we're seeing, which is what this live is all about on shop floors and with our clients, is about how do you make your technology work for you in the modern business in 2026. So before I let Adam introduce himself, we are live on YouTube and LinkedIn today. So as always, we invite you to join the conversation. It doesn't so much matter what we say, it matters what's best for your business, right? And a lot of that comes from the dialogue we have in these types of streams. So we appreciate, any questions or comments. Good morning. Happy Friday. Happy to be here. So it's nice and cool here. We've had like hot weather. So we're excited, a little break from the heat. But good morning, Adam. How's your Friday treating you?
My Friday's doing all right. I have some fun new things to play with, so I'm excited about that. Looking forward to the weekend. Had a good week as well, so also excited about that. Uh, this particular topic is an interesting one. How do we improve processes that aren't technically standardized? Um, there's two bits and pieces of it. Is like, are they not standardized for a reason, right? As should they be? Um, and the answer to that kind of dictates which direction you go with, right? So we had a good conversation. Looking forward to it today. Glad to be here. For those of you who haven't been following us, my name is Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of the Confluential, and we have a background in technology as it pertains to enabling processes. So this is a good conversation for us.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to like rip the band-aid off and ask you the hardest question I have in the live, because let's just go, right? Let's go. So we've got, especially in our world, when we specialize in heavy industry, we're a boutique agency. And so the more complex the manufacturing implementation, that's usually when we're called in, right? Metals, mining, biopharma, food and beverage, those types of different pieces. So we've got different plants, departments, different shifts, different locations, different individuals, right? How do you build a system around processes that are in different locations or aren't standard in any way? Like, where do you even start in those types of different pieces?
Yeah, so you start at the beginning of the question, right? Are we just in different places, or are we truly using different processes, right? So, there are different places could mean that we only make this thing over here, and we make that other thing over there, and that might be why there are different locations. Different locations might be down the road from each other. They might be on the other side of the world from each other. And so the question as it pertains to the processes being different starts with why. I'll give you an example that we're digging into right now. We have a client who recently went live on a new system, and their processes were kind of destroyed by this new system. That the integrator did not really capture their requirements appropriately. And so they are working to try to figure out how to get this system to work for them. They've implemented this on a number of subsidiaries, and the corporate is moving on to the next ones. And so the client is trying to figure out what to do. And in some cases, the answer will be, well, we're going to use the new system for what it's been built for. And that's an important distinguishing factor, right? What did we build it for that we should just start using it for? Because some of this is oriented towards people just don't want to change. And because somebody screwed something up, now I have a reason not to change.
Yeah.
It's become more ingrained in my opinion. The other side of it is now that these they have 4 different locations that all went live onto this software. And what they're doing is they are all for doing the same things now their own ways, right?
Mm.
Because these new solutions have been created by the individuals that run them at each site. Granted, each site is a little bit different, size, nature, what is the processes that they're facilitating have slightly different requirements. But this is 6 months later, and now their processes are diverging where they shouldn't, and in the past didn't, right? So the question that we're digging into there is, what can we do about this? What can we learn about the ones that are doing something really well over here? And how can we use that solution to fix this over here, and vice versa? And do we have a gold standard? Are we forfeiting some sense of fidelity in data to get things done faster?
Yeah.
One location, and that's making it look better than it is. Maybe the location that doesn't look like they're processing things as quickly is actually doing a better job, right? So all of those are good questions on the spectrum of why are we doing things differently in the first place, and is that because of the locations? Is that because of the requirements and those types of things? So we're going to dig into those with them and work through to diagnose root cause. So that's the first thing. What do we do about processes that we need to improve that aren't technically standard? As we figure out what's wrong with them in the first place. Maybe nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and then the answer becomes, okay, then why are we talking about changing anything at all? There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with it. So start with the root cause, and then you go from there.
Cool. I think this question here on LinkedIn is an interesting piece of like, what is so we might have a root cause for one, and then we might have a different root cause, right? So the question is, when 5 people describe the same process 5 different ways, how do you determine what the process actually is, or maybe what the process should be, as you're saying?
Yeah. So when 5 people describe the same process 5 different ways, is it really the same process? Let's think about it a little bit, right? So let's say we have a manufacturing process. We make aluminum. Okay. Why are you making aluminum differently than they are? Well, because we're different. Okay. What does that mean, right? Like, and then you start digging into it, and they say, well, we roll coils, and somebody else says, well, we just do sheet and plate. Okay, so maybe that's part of why we're doing things differently. And somebody else says, well, we just do extrusions. Now we've got 3 legitimately different processes, right? How do we do that? Why do we do those differently? Because they have different manufacturing requirements, and it sets up something entirely different from a process perspective. So when they're describing the same process, aluminum manufacturing, in that case, 3 different ways, because they are 3 different manufacturing processes that lead to 3 different outputs. So you gotta start looking at the output of the solution in general, as well as the inputs and what the process is. We start thinking about, well, we all do the same thing, and it is truly the same thing. Then we start asking, why are we doing it differently? And sometimes, when we get 5 people doing the same thing 5 different ways, the best thing to do is just get them all in a room and talk to the people who are actually doing it too. One of the things that I think is a mistake a lot of folks make is they talk to the managers. The managers will tell you how it's supposed to be done, and that's what we want to know, right? That's what we're trying to standardize. We're trying to standardize how it's supposed to be done. No, I don't really want to know what the manager thinks is supposed to be happening. I want to know what's actually happening. That's where our process is being facilitated at that shop floor level on what's actually happening. So that's the next step in figuring out why are we doing the same thing 5 different ways. It's let's talk to the people that are actually doing it, and maybe they actually do have different things. We may be talking about state to state. Well, we're doing it this way and we're doing it that way, and come to find out that there's a state regulation that one is beholden to and the other is not. Maybe it's country by country, or maybe it's just these folks are doing it differently because management said so.
Yeah. I think that piece of it is incredibly important, understanding like the needs for the front lines, specifically from a system standpoint. Like, right, we can see a lot of process improvement or process optimization, but when it comes to needing to implement one system, right, it doesn't have to be identical, right? But we do need to be able to know that this system works for this plant, and this system is going to also work for this plant. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the time that's where standardization happens, because we're all going to need to at least be doing kind of the same thing, right? In order for our system to essentially fit our needs, like in the manufacturing process, like a manufacturing execution system, right? How are we going to pick one if we all do different things, even if that matches our state or our federal regulations? How do we choose one if like those are different?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you're picking a system that's a facilitated process that's supposed to be able to represent those differences, right? If you truly have 5 different ways of doing things, and those are truly necessary, then you should be focusing on a system that accommodates all 5 of those differences, right? That becomes 5 different sets of requirements. And this isn't abnormal. There are companies that do all kinds of different things across all types of different verticals and in different pieces in lines of business, right? So this isn't different. This isn't news. It's just something that you had to accommodate, right? You can't force one company to do something and another company to do the same thing if they produce dramatically different things, right? It's the Procter and Gamble, right? Like, it's how many different things do they make?
I don't know. Let's
It's
ask ChatGPT.
probably millions, right? Like, they're a massive organization. Do you think that means that they have to have a different software system and a different process for every single one of those? No, but what they do need is something that can accommodate all of them, and that's the difference, right? That's what we need to be able to focus on when it comes to technology. If we're standardizing something, the standardizing to me comes in different flavors. There are processes that can be standardized, yes. And the idea there is to do it as much the same as possible, as in as many places as possible. But at the same time, there will be different local differences, which is fine. There's also technology standardization, which is a different question, right? Do we want everybody to be on the same software system? Why do we have to be? Is that necessary? Because it's hard to do. If we're trying to get everybody on the same software system and they are indeed doing different things, then we got to build that software system every different way. And then the question becomes, is that practical? I have one of my favorite examples of the difference here. I often advocate for multiple ERP systems, but sometimes it's necessary. What comes to mind is a client that I had a while back that did food manufacturing, but they did coffee and tea extracts and beans and processed beans, processed tea leaves, and all that stuff. There's a manufacturing process behind that, right? From those things, they also did extracts and all that jazz, but there's a manufacturing process there. They had an ERP system that helped them manufacture all of those things. They also had a different ERP that helped them manage the actual agricultural side of this. The ag side of growing coffee beans and tea leaves and all that jazz, and making those become a raw material of the manufacturing process was so different that you couldn't put them in the same system. So they ended up with 2, which is fine. It was annoying for sure, right? But now you got to figure out how to roll all the information up. under one corporate view, because the CEO doesn't want to see half of the data here and half of the data there. They want to see how the whole company is doing. It's not abnormal to do all of this stuff. It's just a matter of figuring out where the segmentation is, figuring out where to cut, and divide them in two and go from there.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest piece of another piece that's so difficult in that is like, where does the process meet the technology, right? In that example, that clearly required kind of a specialized architecture, right? Where we had two different ERP systems that were passing data and moving things through the organization. So we knew that those processes could not change. A lot of times what we see, especially with, the movement towards agentic AI and different agents that's layered in, say, your core operating systems or your different systems, we've seen kind of the process slowly be pushed to move towards to meet the needs of the technology. And we always say, like, it's a marriage, right? Like, there's going to have to be compromises on both sides. But when are you over engineering to meet your technology no longer becoming or losing, right, a lot of what you really value as an organization?
Well, I think if you're asking about when do you say, wait a minute, time out, we're overdoing this, you have to start thinking about the purpose. Why we talk a lot about why are we doing these things. It has to be intentional, and it has to be on purpose, right? With intent and purpose. And when we start thinking about optimizing a process without over engineering it, where do you start to think about where you're adding so many steps that it becomes overburdened, right? One of what I think is actually a better example of this is how do you manage an IT delivery department without getting in the way, right? There's a function that IT needs to have, which is very much like production scheduling. These teams are going to build these things on this schedule, and they're going to come together, right? I have one customer that asked for something that involves three different teams, and they all need to deliver together, right? That's production scheduling, right? This happens every day. For some reason, IT doesn't seem to be able to figure this out as well sometimes, right? Especially manufacturing companies. There's an irony to that a manufacturing company can't figure out how to do this, which is fine. It's hard to do, right? And when it's not tied to actually making money, it's tied towards a cost center, it gets less focus. So the irony isn't without its own explanation, but it is what it is. How do you create a delivery management function without over-engineering it? And by that, what we're doing right now is trying to make sure that we don't get in the way, right? We had a conversation this week with this client, which was, we have this thing, it's going on, it's almost done. It touches more than one team, and it's something that we're gonna have to figure out how to release with everything else. But it hasn't gone through an intake or anything like that. It's just getting done. It was initially raised as a ticket. The ticketing, the solution of the ticket kind of grew in its own scope, and we've been delivering it along the way. It's still really small. It's not a ton of work. And so this thought process that anything that touches multiple teams and multiple roadmaps and multiple capacities should go through a review. Okay. Technically, the thought process behind going through that review is so that you can go through a planning process, so that you can then understand the capacity, resources, and scheduling roadmaps of the teams that are impacted, and then plan it from a perspective of, all right, this team needs to do their work in this pace, and then this team goes next, and then this team goes next. It will take more time to do all of that planning than it will to just get this thing done, right? Sometimes you have to let people do their jobs when they're very good at it, and these people are very good at their jobs, and so they should just be allowed to do that. So what did we do? We said, okay, cool. We'll put it on the list of things that we've reviewed, and we're going to get out of the way. right? Nobody needs to well, this needs to go up through the change control board and the enterprise change committee. Like, no, that's stupid. This is they're gonna. It's by the time we get to them, this could be done. Everybody agrees that there's value in it. We have people who are on good authority saying that the value is there, especially from an executive sponsorship perspective. So you just go and get it done. Um, Optimizing that process without over engineering it is just a key to understanding what are we trying to accomplish here. Let's keep our eyes on the ball and go from there. So
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's a lot wrapped up in there, but I think on that edge, like that's how we get to in these process engineering or these process workshops, right? Trying to figure out how we don't look at IT as a huge bottleneck, right? And that really that leads to a lot of other challenges in the organization when we're
yeah,
doing things like vibe coding, which we talked about last week. If you didn't see like kind of our IT and business conversation around what does a citizen developer look like in those conversations last week, definitely go check that out on our YouTube channel, or we actually did one on our TikTok channel as well, which goes on our YouTube channel. It's all connected, right? It's interoperability at its finest. So I think that's a big consideration when looking at these conversations. So in turning back to our questions here, I think a good one over here is talking about ROI. Like a lot of this, we can get focused in more of kind of the devil's in the details, right? Conversation or analysis paralysis. And if we look at it from an ROI standpoint, how do you know? And I mean, ERP, it takes years, right? I think that's known. But when it comes to other systems, you might be layering over your ERP system, agents, looking at those types of things. How do we know if we're in a large implementation, and how should we expect to be setting expectations for ROI?
well, I think ROI on a systems implementation is incredibly hard to, to define, right? How much are you going to spend and how much are you going to make because of it? Your ERP system is going to make you a whole $0, right? Your ERP is not going to make money for you. But what it is going to do is it's going to put your team in a place to be more competitive, to be able to do things faster. It's going to help you be more. It's going to increase your visibility of what it is you can do as an organization with
Mhm.
these resources and those resources. It's those decisions that are the actual difference in what an ERP can do for you. The same thing is true with an MES, although an MES can be far more tied directly to throughput
Mhm.
because it can do things a bit. It can enhance your scheduling and those types of things. So there are things that can be tied to that. But if you're looking for an ROI that's a dollar amount on an ERP, um, you're measuring the wrong thing. At the end of the day, I've had multiple CEOs and CFOs tell me, I don't expect an ROI on this. I just know it's money I have to spend. It just is that way. So I think that it's important to remember that some of these things we do as a business aren't anything other than trying to help us function.
Mhm.
That's a big piece of the puzzle when it comes to systems implementations. That's different though than process standardization. Right?
Mhm.
A system is a tool that I can use to help standardize my processes. And then when I go after my processes, I can measure how long it takes. I can measure where I'm going to make improvements, and then I can measure how much faster it's going to happen. Those are the things that become enabled, right? But that's not an ERP system that's going to do that. The ROI comes from actually going and making those changes and standardizations rather than implementing a new system. And that's something that I think a lot of people get backwards on
Mhm.
technology. Technology is a tool. If you don't
Mhm.
use it, it does nothing.
Mhm.
And so to gain anything from it, you have to be using it effectively and
Yeah,
have targeted ROI on something else.
absolutely. If you don't use it, you lose it, if you will. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So in looking at these, a lot of the work that you do obviously is coming in after the fact in these types of conversations. I wonder, what are some main things that you see where in the how do you systematically optimize processes that people get
Yeah.
wrong a lot of the time?
Um, that's what a loaded question. What are the things that people get wrong with standardization and technology? They get all kinds of things wrong, right? So the first and foremost thing is because we're doing something at all, it's going to actually save money. Sometimes doing nothing is more effective, right? At the end of the day, though, it comes down to being able to clearly set expectations and objectives on what it is we're trying to accomplish. Otherwise, you're just doing things and stuff that you're hoping do something good for you, right? And sometimes you're going to be right on that. That's fine, but it's not always going to be as big a deal as you want it to be, and it's not always going to provide as much as it can if you're not focused on being having a specific goal and target in mind.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think, Ryan's comment here kind of speaks to that to some point. It can take longer to plan than to just get things done. That can happen, but it's also important to make sure your leadership across teams understands the business priority and the direction. I think a lot of what you're saying there in that conversation of where things go wrong, we can, kind of pull that back to alignment. Like what are you trying to accomplish? And being so close to
Yeah,
that in the organization can be really really hard to see,
yeah,
right? Having that outside perspective, not even like just from us but like it just in general, to kind of step back and be like what are our priorities, go back to the basics,
yeah,
is going to be a huge piece, because maybe it's not a priority for someone else and maybe it is very highly for another team, and you kind of have to make that compromise, especially if you're doing things like delivery management and those that you have to have some sort of priority measure, so it's not just a free for all of like when our technology goes where.
yeah. When here's it's funny. I was talking to the CIO of one of our clients, one of my friends, close friends as well, and he's interested, of course, in this delivery management function that we're building. And I told him, like, here's one of our biggest problems, and we haven't run into it yet because we aren't ready to run into this problem. We aren't ready to resolve this. We're on it. We're building an intake and moving into the planning stage, right? But at some point, we're going to have to answer a very difficult question, and that very difficult question is actually two questions that I think about. What should IT be working on next, and why? That's like those simple questions. What should I do next and why are incredibly difficult to answer if you don't have alignment. Because then you
Hmm.
just start working on everything. And then you wonder why nothing gets done. And then you wonder why we're 90% complete on every single thing, but not 100% complete on anything. Because we've been all over the place. We don't know what we're supposed to be working on. So we're working on all of them at the same time. And now they start to fall apart because I was working on this one and that one at the same time. And when I worked on this one, it damaged that one. It broke something somewhere else. Now I
Hmm.
got to fix that and figure out how to do this at the same time. This over here doesn't matter, right? This at the bottom of the list, but it's something that might be somewhat related.
Hmm.
So we'll do the same. I don't care if that one ever gets done.
Hmm.
This one needs to be done by the end of the month, end of the quarter, whatever you want to call it. And now we're holding that more important one up for something teeny tiny because it's related and nobody cares,
Hmm.
right? I'm in a rush to get out the door. I really don't care if you think that I need to flush my antifreeze and refill my windshield wiper fluid with new higher quality stuff when all I want is an oil change.
Hmm.
I want to get my oil changed and I want to get out. You want to spend 15, 20 more minutes talking to me about my air filter and my fluid, my other fluids. I don't care. They're fine. Are they causing problems? No? Okay. Because if I run my car for any longer with the oil the way that it is, it will die.
Whoa, I feel attacked. I feel personally attacked by
Well,
that
that's because you did that. So.
I've done that multiple times in multiple cars.
So now I changed the oil.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, he's always changed the oil, but there's been many times where I've run out of oil, which is a terrible thing to do to a car. So
I'm literally traveling on the road. I'm on the other side of the country, and I took the car to the mechanic. Okay, they're gonna call you. Okay, and the mechanic's first question, and I kid you not, because at the end of the day, there are questions that you ask, and they're kind of like, "Did you really just ask me that question?" He goes, "So how long has it been running without oil?" And I told like, "You think if I could answer that question, it would be running without oil? Like,
yeah.
like if I knew that, then it would have oil in it."
In my defense, it was broken, okay, allegedly. And I didn't know. I didn't know it was out of oil. Okay, so like there was nothing that I could have done in that direct situation, but I have openly just ignored. Like my car needs an oil change right at this moment, and I have ignored that. But again, because it's not a priority for me. My priority is to get my children to school, and all of those different things. I sometimes forget about the details of life, but obviously when we maintain anything, whether it be a system or a car, we need to make sure that the alignment is around those. And I think that that's a perfect example of like, a lot of times we like to skip the boring parts. And we can see that a lot with like this question over here from Avery about AI and agents. Like, should companies be expecting a shorter time to value than they would from traditional enterprise software? I would even take that a step further to say, like, if we don't have alignment of what we're trying to achieve, we implement these types of things just to implement them. And we, in manufacturing circles, we might not see that as much as like co-pilots and generative AI and things like that, where that is coming more to the workplace. But I do think that there's a level at which we bypass the core needs and maintenance of other pieces of the system because they are too boring in the world of AI and agents.
Well, and I think that's a really good point on the shiny things. But the human beings have been distracted by shiny things since the dawn of time, right? But AI is just the next iteration of it, and it's causing people to make some mistakes. Now, what I will give AI the benefit of the doubt on is when you make a mistake, because you went and did it quickly, you identified it quickly, you can fix it quickly, right? That's the whole point of a lot of process improvements. Let's fail fast, right? So let's use AI to fail fast. How do we do that? We get something stood up that works and see where it doesn't, and then we move on, right? So I would say, should companies be expecting a much shorter time to value than they would from traditional enterprise software? Maybe, but that value, they shouldn't be expecting to be monumental. That's, I want to be particular about how I say that though. The value that AI can add to your business is monumental. That's not debatable. However, if we're talking about shortening time to value, we shouldn't be expecting the same monumental benefits in a shorter time period. At the end of the day, we should be expecting a short amount of time and small benefits, and then they compound, right? That's what we should be doing.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Let's do this one from YouTube. You guys are doing great on the comment situation. I got into tech because I love manual type coding, but AI is able to do it better than me by 1,000 times. What do you suggest me getting better than AI in coding or logic building?
For me, logic is always the key component of it. I'm a strategist at heart, and so the logic behind everything makes a bigger difference to me. There are lots of different ways of coding any particular piece of software. So all AI is doing is is what some other coder could do. It's just another coder, right? Yes, it can do it faster. Yes, it can do it with a greater volume and all of that jazz. But the quality of it is just another method for pumping out code. It's generating content. Uh,
Hmm.
what it's not doing is creating logic that syncs with actual strategy. And you can ask it to do that, but at the end of the day, it will only give you ideas on strategy. It can't set a strategy for you. Setting a strategy and following it from a rationale and logic perspective is something that people do. And that's okay. That's not to say that they can't be informed by AI on what our options are. But for me, the logic in it, and if I need to be able to trace what happens here, to get back in a more of a technical coding perspective, if I need to be able to trace what happens and the business
Exactly.
rules behind
Yeah.
it, what are the impact of those business rules, and how do I trace that downstream? So I'm going to do this, and then if this happens, then that happens. If not, you know, something totally different needs to go down a different path. That type of logic to me is more important than the black and white code behind it. So it's a great question.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
but at the end of the day, um, a nail gun, a hydraulic nail gun, boom, 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 boom. It helps a lot of people build houses faster, but it doesn't help in the design of the house. It doesn't help with the idea that um, putting the toilet in the kitchen doesn't really work. Uh, it's kind of even though the plumbing's in the same spot, right? Is where the logic is there from a certain perspective, but not the complete perspective. So
Hmm.
for me, the logic is something that has a softer touch to it that AI can provide ideas on, but can't replace.
Yeah. I think that that is so true. And then, how do you fix the vibe coding that the business did that broke, the invoicing process or something like that? That's the new ability to
Right.
do that. I think that that's a big one. I like this question. I feel like this is a life question. How do you distinguish between failing fast and just implementing badly quickly? So I think this one we've seen. I almost want to add like a sprinkle of agile to this too, because we've seen so many organizations go to, oh, now all of a sudden we're agile, and it's like, okay, well, that's actually a pretty disciplined practice and methodology. It's has very little to do
Yeah.
with the actual word of being flexible and agile. Um, but this to me is the question that each business needs to ask itself in 2027. Are you doing it fast? Are you doing it bad? And how do you know the difference between the two?
Well, so I mean, it's nuanced, right? It's just kind of one of those things. You can drive fast, and you can do a good job of that, or you can do a bad job of that. What happens when you fail fast? Sometimes the impacts are more dramatic when you fail fast. Sometimes they're more dramatic when you implement badly quickly, right? I think that the actual answer is somewhere in between the thought process of if you're paying attention
Hmm.
and you're measuring the results, um, you're able to correct no matter what you do. And that's really what you're trying to do. But sure, you know what? Implementing badly quickly, sometimes failing fast is implementing badly quickly because
Hmm.
it depends on what you want to call it, is implementing badly, right? We implemented the wrong system. We had the wrong software. We had the wrong process. We had the wrong something else. And so we did that and it blew up in our face. We executed flawlessly, but it blew up in our face. Or we had exactly the right answer and we just executed it poorly.
Absolutely.
You know,
And then
like
and then
go.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, go and look at it after the fact, right?
Yeah,
That's the key. Look at the failure and diagnose it. Is it
exactly.
because we had the right idea, we just did a bad job executing, or we did an awesome job executing, and what we did was actually pretty stupid? That's different, right? So
Yeah.
it has to do with What were you trying to set out to do? And why were the results not what you expected them to be?
And like, so I think it's that piece of it is so important. Can you analyze the failure humbly, right? Like, are you going to be okay with saying like, oh yeah, that was a terrible idea. Like we need to pivot to do something else. That's going to be the agile ability,
Yeah.
right? To say like, we made the wrong decision. We're totally fine with that and
Yeah.
take accountability for that. And our people trust us to do that. So now when we whip in a left-hand turn, our people aren't like, yeah, right. They're never going to be able to do that. They blah, blah, blah. They're going to be more of oh, well, that was the wrong. So we're going to try this instead. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be the thing that makes you quote unquote agile, since that's, a business strategy on that side. Certainly not in the same as a methodology. But
I want
absolutely.
to answer this question. Any tips on a resource that can help
Oh,
me?
okay.
I honestly, right now, I'm very much into Claude. I like Claude a lot, and so I found that the way that Claude approaches things is a really good, complex way of creating logic that I can follow, and then you can use it to turn into code. Right? If you set the logic, it can write the code, and then you can validate it. Right? So I think that's my personal favorite right
Mhm.
now. We still use all kinds of different tools to make sure that we're not getting overly beholden to one. But Claude right now is doing an awesome job of those types of things. Um, so as we think about things like change and the changing strategy and all of that stuff, I can't believe that I'm at risk of overanalyzing the thought process that Avery here is actually referencing Friends rather than anything else that
Oh yeah.
is a bit more modern than my historical.
That's what I
Memory.
thought she was referencing. So I'm with you there. We're
Maybe
old.
not. I've fallen into that trap before, but that's neither here nor there. Um, I sometimes feel old. Well, let's put it this way. I am certain that Avery doesn't know what the Andy Griffiths show is. I did learn that this week. Um,
Oh,
do you?
yeah. I mean, I do know what it is. I've never seen it, but like, yes, I know what it is. Adam's ancient. I'm
Well,
old, but Adam is like, whoa.
anyway, so as we start thinking about some of this other stuff, I think that um, I want to go back to a thought that I had in my head on change and getting better. The thought process of AI and agile and all that stuff. At the end of the day, it all takes a purpose, right?
Mhm.
Purpose and intent. Those are key components of it. And where like there aren't a lot of businesses out there that are just doing things and stuff and getting lucky, right? Even when you set some type of an undefinable goal, and Elon Musk is a great example on that. He's going to go to Mars. How? No clue. But he's certainly got some steps that are going to put him in the right direction. He's got a plan for that, and then he's going to adjust on it, right? Um, I would be shocked if the idea of catching a rocket with chopsticks was his first idea in this conversation, right? And being able to land a rocket back on planet Earth after sending it to space. That would be surprising to me. So some of this is about figuring out where we go and how we do this. And at the end of the day, when you start asking questions like, is there such thing as too much structure in a business? Well, the answer is yes. Because if you have so much structure that you're paying attention to the structure of your business so much that you're failing to adjust to the market. How did I start the confidential? I didn't actually. So,
Yeah. I'll
so,
take that one for the, no, I'm just joking. You
but
keep going.
at the end of the day, if you're paying so much attention to the processes and the technology in your business that you're forgetting that you're actually producing something that a client wants and needs, customer wants and needs, then yeah, you got too much structure.
Well, there you go. There you go. I think, again, I think the biggest piece of understanding that, though, is being able to diagnose it. And
Yeah.
I think that's so hard for internal organizations to do themselves. Just because, again, they don't have a lot of different reference points. So if you have a technology vendor, an IT vendor, or anything like that, do you recommend them kind of helping you with doing that, or understanding these processes that are going to go along best with the technology they're selling you?
To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, like you can't outsource your brain, right? That's
Really?
something that we haven't figured out yet. But at the end of the day, you should they should if you're buying software from the right people, if you're buying the right software from the right people, you should be able to treat them as experts, and as partners who can tell you how the software is supposed to do something, how it's supposed to natively function. On the other side of the coin, though, you have to remember that they are there to do their job, which is to implement software and make money. Your job is to do something else and make money, right? So when you think about it, just make sure that you're not approaching it from a perspective of saying, they're here to help me in my business and they have this altruistic purpose for helping me make my business better. They're not.
Hmm.
That may happen in the process if you're paying attention, but they're not there to they're not responsible for your business. You are.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's the
Yeah,
piece of it that I
as we
think is
always talk
important.
about on our TikTok lives, you're responsible for what you buy. Okay. So if you didn't read the
Mhm.
contract, if you didn't understand it, that's ultimately on you. Can it be sneaky and shady? For sure. But ultimately, it's going to be your responsibility, which is why you need to take it so seriously. So do the processes become before the technology, or after, or at the same time?
Before. Absolutely before. And part of that is that you trace all of it back to the purpose. The business existed before the technology. And so the process to facilitate the business existed before the technology. The people that facilitate the process that's enabled by technology, it has to exist before it's enabled.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so any kind of, as we're at approaching the 50-minute mark here, this is so like nuanced and unique to each organization, and they need to get good at being able to understand what that looks like. Any kind of final thoughts, or things that you want people to walk away with from this conversation?
I think that at the end of the day, if we go back to the comment, the topic of how do you systematically improve processes that aren't standardized, is asking why. You know that there's so many questions that people don't ask that are important. Why? What should IT be working on next? And why? Right? Why are we trying to standardize our processes in the first place? Why are our processes different? If you start asking why they're different, that might tell you what direction to standardize in as well, right?
Hmm.
So, well, they're different because of this, this, and this. So, if my goal is to make them the same, I now know what it is going to become a challenge on making them standardized.
Hmm.
So that's the most important part. Ask why, dig in,
Hmm.
and ask it again. All right. Well, if that's the case, why is that the case?
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I think the other thing I would just add to that is I think businesses need to get really obsessed with being able to understand how they do things, why, and being able to diagnose that change, right? And that comes from a multi-layered approach of having trust and transparency with your leadership team, also being honest with the systems that you have now, and being able to evaluate them, and that is a very difficult thing to do. Just and reminding everyone that technology strategy is as unique as your own business's DNA, right? It really needs to be not a templated approach. That doesn't mean that you can't have, industry standards or things like that that you need to follow. That just means that you need to be able to understand what the needs are of your business and go find a technology, or look at the technology you have today and say, why is it not meeting our needs? A lot of times when we go into an organization, we're going to keep the legacy system, right? We're going to really get down and kind of peel and out the layers of the onion to be like, okay, what actually is wrong? Oh, Karen from accounting doesn't like the interface, and she's been here for 20 years, and she's slowly convinced the entire organization that this system doesn't work. So just remembering that there is always opportunities to do whatever's best for you, not what's best for somebody else's business, right? So. But with that, thank you so much, Adam, for your time today. Thank you guys for the comments here, both on YouTube and LinkedIn. If you don't join our TikTok lives, we'd love to see you on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern time. We do those. You can find them on our TikTok channel as well as our Instagram channel. You also can give us a follow here. We really appreciate it. It helps us be able to kind of spread this message and this awareness for free, because a lot of this type of information you'd have to pay a lot of money to get access to, and that's our overall goal. We do these lives every Friday, usually right at 12 p.m. Eastern time here in the States. So we hope that you can join us next week. If you have questions, as I mentioned, right, each strategy is very unique. So I invite you to either DM Adam or myself and be able to ask questions about your organization. We're always happy to answer those. So with that, we really appreciate your time today, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.